on record. Okay, so welcome everybody to this Developing Permaculture Farm Enterprises workshop and discussion. Really excited to have you all here this evening. We're recording this, so if you're watching the recording, welcome to you as well. My name is Andy Goldring and I'm the Chief Executive of the Permaculture Association, and I'll be facilitating tonight, which will just hopefully be very gentle. And in this session, Hannah Thorogood is going to share the story of her successful mixed farm enterprise called the Inkpot as a case study of how permaculture design can transform land and create a vibrant business. And I've been to the Inkpot quite a few times, and one of the reasons I'm so pleased to be doing this with Hannah is because it's great. It's a fantastic farm, and it's really very inspiring the work which she's doing. So we're going to hear from Hannah to start with, and then we'll follow that up with any questions you might have about her work and the permaculture approach. And then we're going to invite any of you to share your own experiences of using permaculture within farm enterprises. So I've spoken to James already, and it'd be really lovely to hear from you, James, and see what you're doing. Dennis, I don't know if there's anything you want to bring in, or Michelle, and we'll see if other people join us shortly, but it'd be good to do some sharing. And then I think once we've done that, we will just explore some of the key questions. So things like, how can we really use the design approach to help make a farm more diverse? How do we manage having many crops? Being a polyculture means you've got more crops to sell. So how do you manage the complexity of having multiple things to sell? And I'm sure there'll be other good questions too. So we'll have time for questions together. So welcome to Adrian and everyone else that's joined. And maybe I could just hand over to Hannah. Do you want me to give you should I present your biography, Hannah? Would you like me to do that?
Yeah, I think you should, Andy.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to. I mean, I've known Hannah myself, I think possibly since about sort of 2003 or 4 or 5 or something like that. Quite some time anyway. And Hannah's always made a big impression on me because you're a very talented person. You're a very successful one-woman farmer who's not only mob grazing with cattle and sheep, but also with turkeys that are award-winning. And you've been practicing regenerative techniques for about 10 years and permaculture for nearly 20 years. And you're a very experienced permaculture farmer, designer and teacher. And I know you've inspired a lot of people with all your permaculture training and the diploma work that you do. So that's fantastic. And I think the most important thing to say here is that you've taken a farm from an 18-acre, really depleted, compacted, toxic, arable field into this really diverse, abundant 100+ acre farm. So you've grown your business, you've regenerated the land. And, given that permaculture is all about earth care and people care and fair shares, I think you really demonstrate all of that in practice. So thank you, Hannah. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your story about how you've been using permaculture to develop your farm enterprise. So I shall stop talking and start the clock. And if you haven't finished in half an hour, I'll give you a gentle nudge.
Yeah, do. That's grand. Thanks, Andy. That's lovely. Well, Andy's said it all now. I don't need to say anything else. He's done it. It's great. So yeah, I am a permaculture teacher, farmer, designer. And I've been working on permaculture on farms and working on permaculture for 15 or more years, and came to an 18-acre field 11 years ago that became our home. So that's the Inkpot, if you've heard of it or if you follow it on social media or anything. We've got a lovely following. So it's now the Inkpot Organic Farm, and it's in Lincolnshire, South Lincolnshire. So I don't really think we count as the north at all when we've got people like James from way up north here in with us, but technically we're more north than the southerners. So yeah, But so we have very mild climate. We're lowlands, but not fenlands. So we're on a mountain at 22 meters, but very, very exposed. So we're lowlands, but we are actually the highest point till Poland at this latitude, because from us you go down to the fens, then across the sea, across the Netherlands, across North Germany. So when the cold east wind blows, it really blows cold at hours. And as Andy said, when we got here, it was a very depleted, compacted arable field. It was literally like a blank canvas, put down, right, what you're going to do with that. Heavy clay, slightly north-facing slope. So lots of people's nightmare. And for anyone here who's a new entrant, that's a brilliant opportunity to look at the land and get to know the land that other people don't want. So our land had been used as an arable field, but it got a bad reputation locally because tractors had got stuck in it, because it should never be an arable field. It's such heavy clay. So growing up on clay in Bedfordshire, I knew what to do, because I'd be lost on sand. Don't know how to do sand. I can do clay. It's an investment soil, because whatever you put into it stays in it. It's great. So over the last 11 years, we built it up. So initially we built it up as a family. Didn't start off as a one-woman farm. Started with a husband and 2 3-year-old children who have always been equal decision makers right from the beginning on the farm. About 6 years ago, the family evolved into a one adult household, and so now it's kind of, it might be a bit harsh to say I'm a one-woman farm, because really I'm a 3-woman farm, because Elizabeth and Martha, my twin girls, are now 14, and they are very, very active within the farm as well. So still equal decision makers. And so when I say equal decision makers, that means that every animal, every enterprise, every event, volunteer that we have on the farm, it only happens with their say-so. And they have the right to veto anything that happens. And so there's a lot of interesting design that comes in. So like with Andy said, permaculture, if anyone's new to permaculture, permaculture is a whole system design approach. So looking at the whole system of the farm and designing from there, and then bringing it down to the smaller details. And the very core of what permaculture is the 3 ethics. And so that's care for the earth, so looking after the planet. It's kind of an obvious one, I think, to anyone that's here and farming. And then it's care for the people, which again sounds obvious, but it's a really good reminder that care for the people starts with yourself, and then radiates out to your immediate friends and family, wider community, and out to the world. And it's kind of a deliberate move that way, that if we don't look after ourselves, we ain't no good to no one else. And then the 3rd ethic comes in lots of different forms. People, you'll hear it being called lots of different things, but I think of it as fair share. It's also kind of redistribution of the surplus, and it's looking at how can we bring a real fair side of things to our enterprises. And so when we're talking about enterprises as business opportunities, it's thinking along the lines of fair trade, cooperative kind of thinking. Those are all things that we're very familiar with. It might be thinking about fair pricing structures. So like this fantastic conference has a double level for people to pay. And it's all of that kind of thinking to bring into your farming enterprises. So I'll talk about that a little bit. So fast forward on from, really we kind of in some ways started 6 years ago, even though I've been here 11 years ago. So 6 years ago I had an 18-acre, well, we had an 18-acre field. With the split, I ended up with no tools, no vehicles, no nothing, and 4 lambs, ewe lambs, and 2 heifers. And so from there, we've gone on to renting out other bits of land, developing our customer base, growing our animals, and we're now at 150 sheep, 11 head of cattle. We have between 100 and 200 turkeys each year for Christmas, about 50 chickens, give or take, a couple of goats, couple of ducks, couple of dogs, couple of teenagers, chuck it all in there. And but they all have an important role within the system. So it's not like a crazy sporadic small holding with loads of things just dotted around. Everything is an important cog within that system. So I can talk about the Inkpot endlessly. I'm not going to. What I want to talk about specifically is how we use permaculture at the Inkpot. So I just want to show you this file that is I've got lots of stuff on the computer, but in that file are all permaculture designs that I use on the farm. So I've got more designs over in the office that are the initial physical layout designs of the farm. And there's lots of stuff you can learn about how to do that, of looking at the mapping of the whole site. So anyone that's got a farm that hasn't done permaculture, it's a bit like when you apply for your stewardship scheme, say, and you have to get your map of the whole farm and look at how it all works and lay it all out and make a plan. Permaculture is like that, with a defined kind of set of steps to go through and a whole load of tools that you can use. So it can be really useful if you are an existing farmer and wanting to look at how do we enter the new elm scheme or current stewardship schemes. Using a permaculture design approach is spot on for that. It really helps you to put it all together. Lots of tools that we can use. What I wanted to look at specifically tonight, really, as the title says, is to look at our designs for enterprises. So I like I said, I've got them on the computer, but I'm a kind of a pencil and pens kind of girl, and get out a load of paper. And so how I use this would be to look at, one of the things I looked at was 2017, looked at, okay, how can I really, as a single parent, make an income, a resilient income from the farm? And so I looked at a number of the enterprises that we currently had. So I can go through with the design process, design tools, started with a good old introduction about what we are. I'm not sure if you can see this, and then looked at what my goal was. My goal at that point was to create a 7-year plan that had a viable produce enterprises, bringing in a financial income for the family, working within the 3 ethics. So that's the people care, the earth care, the people care, and the fair share. And to make a plan to get to this stage. So as any of you that have ideas of running a permaculture type farm, or currently running a farm with lots of different income streams, you might recognize something as complex as this. It's a mind map of all the current enterprises, from all the different animals, plants, people, kind of things that we had going on. And then there's the potentials here of what I could do. But really, looking at this, you instantly kind of go, well, there's only one of me as an adult in here, so I don't really think I need to do more. So look through a number of different things. I'm not going to go through every single thing. I'm really happy to share anything about costs or anything like that we did, but it's just not particularly interesting to go through my functions, my boundaries, my resources. But these are all parts that you do as a permaculture design process. You look at what things are going to stop you. So your boundaries, what are the limits that you have on this system? So, you'll always come up with time and money. Those are the two kind of ugly sisters of any system, that whatever you want to do, pretty soon down that line, you're going to go, well, I don't have the time to do it, or I don't have the money to do it. But being realistic about your boundaries is a really important part of the design process. But then equally, a really nice side of that is to go through all your resources. And so to sit down and actually go, well, look at all these things that are going to help me. And it's a really good, anyone that practices mindfulness and gratitude, this is a brilliant thing to go through for your system, your enterprise, your farm, and go, look at all these amazing things that we have at our fingertips that we can use. And everybody, I'm sure, if you had spent a few minutes doing this, would come up with as many as these, So then what I did was, in permaculture, we have a whole suite of tools that we can use. And some of them have been blatantly stolen from other places, and we don't mind that, because it's all about utilizing available resources. So if someone else has come up with a tool in a different walk of life in a different industry, we'll nab it and use it. It's fine. We don't always pretend that it's ours from the beginning. So one of those is a SWOT. So you might recognize this as a SWOT, because in the business world, but we don't want to think about things as threats, because that's scary. So we talk about challenges. And so we look at what are the strengths of the farm, the weaknesses, so those are within the farm itself, and then the opportunities and the challenges that come externally from the farm, both geographically and in time as well. So examples here were kind of the strengths that we had at that point was lots of clover, lots of biodiversity, winning great taste awards, those kind of things. I'm just picking a few out. Weaknesses, things that might resonate with any of you. I'm tired, working long days and weeks and not always in the most efficient way, you know, very kind of human stuff. Things like local poverty, local lack of local awareness. You know, in Lincolnshire, we often kind of think, well, we're not on the edge of Bristol, we're not on the edge of Brighton, we don't have a load of kind of woke consumers banging down our door that want to pay loads of money for food. And I think that is probably something that resonates a lot with people further north, that, you know, I think you've got some great food hubs around, but generally there's a lot of folks out there that are skint and trying to exist day to day, not going, oh, I'm going to pay 3 times as much for something organic and lovely. And then looking at things like opportunities, lots of different ways that we can do, looking at different, you know, finding local foodies and things. And I often laugh at the challenges because they're little things, you know, like declining availability of easy energy, climate chaos, financial uncertainty, you know, those kind of things that we all have. But actually, that's the real core that we have to face. And that's the thing that permaculture can really help you with, is to go, right, let's be really honest here. We look at long time scales. We look at 8 generations when we look at planning for things. And it's not just thinking about the next year, the next season. It's going, okay, let's be real about the chaos of climate and how it's going to go. Let's not, you know, sit back and hope that the politicians are all going to make all the right noises when they get together in lovely places like Scotland and promise that they're going to do all these things. Let's realise that our farms have to be really blooming resilient, and we have to design systems that can be resilient both for ourselves and for our animals and our plants. So that will often come down to having very large reservoirs of rainwater collection, so that we can catch every drop of rainfall when we have 3 months of rainfall in one day, and that we still have enough when we have, you know, 5 months of drought, that there's still enough water. So our animals very, very rarely use any tap water. It's all rainwater. Things like that, you know, how can we build resilience into our systems? So then what I did was go through each of the animals, each of the enterprises that I had, and just did a little kind of take on what do we currently have, what could we do with, what income do we have coming in from those, what are the outgoings. And the key thing, a tool that we use within permaculture, is called an input-output analysis. And it's really, it can teach us a lot, and it's really basic. It's really a really obvious thing to do. So if you think about your cows, if you have cows are nice and simple. They are marvelous beings, but they are nice and simple as an enterprise. Think of your cow system, if any of you have cows, and think, or you can imagine having cows, they're very nice. Then think about what's coming into the cows, what inputs do those cows need? So for us, that's they need grass. They're not fed on any grains. They're the kind of the ultimate in terms of cows that save the planet. But they do need fencing. They need vets very occasionally, touch wood, ear tags, fuel. So not loads, but we do need to move them around, and we use a big old truck to do that, even though most of the time I use an electric car. Electric cars aren't that great for moving cows, not yet. Salt licks, and then hay in winter, and fallen stock guy, you know, the abattoir, fallen stock guy, which aren't really inputs, but they're all things that the cow system needs. Yeah. And then you can think of what are the outputs that comes out of that. So with the cows, we have meat. That's the obvious thing. We're not a vegan system. Total respect for anyone who does want to be vegan. We have, interestingly, as a mainly meat, like livestock farm, we have a huge amount of veggie and vegan followers and supporters because of our high welfare. And that really means a lot to me. So we get veggies that won't eat meat anywhere else, but will when they get that craving or that need to eat meat for health reasons. They will eat our meat. and we get vegans who buy things like our Christmas turkeys for their family, because they're going, right, if you are going to blooming well eat some a turkey, eat one of these ones because they've had a really nice life. So, and we've got vegans who are self-confessed rubbish vegans who eat our eggs because they're like, right, I really miss eggs, but I'll eat their eggs. So those kind of things. Anyway, so but it's much more than the meat. So you've got the inputs of all those things, and then the outputs, we've got the meat, but we could also potentially use the leather. But we've got all the services that the cows do as well as they're going around and grazing. So we've obviously got the fertility, we've got the building up of habitat, we've got the building of soil, we've got the perfect, they have the way they graze, because they graze, they're mob graze, so that they move on every day and then have a 3-month gap recovery period before they go back again. And so they're actually creating the perfect habitat for a bacterial family called methanotropes. And methanotropes, I'm sure some of you already know this, sequester methane from the atmosphere. And so all cows that graze in that system are actually contributing to methane sequestration, which is a really hot topic at the moment, with everyone being certain that cows are, of course, ruining the planet. Just ignore all the aeroplanes and ignore all the cars and ignore everyone moving everything around the planet. It's all down to cow farts. Okay. So anyway, so I did this for the cows. And then I did the same for the sheep and the chickens, the turkeys, everything else. And also, moving on to kind of implementation plan stuff, something that's really important when you look at your enterprises is being really realistic. And this is still very scruffy on paper, but which enterprises need work at different times of the year. So I just did a little kind of, the months of the year. And look, and so cows are very easy a lot of the year. They just need moving on each day and a bit of water. But obviously then you've got your key points where you have calving and the bull going in, or AI, which we did use to begin with when we had just a few cows. So yeah, look, here you've got the inputs and the outputs, if you can see that coming down here as well. So all the inputs and all the outputs. And this is really, although there's quite a long list, some of these are very, very tiny. And so it's looking at creating low input systems with maximum output systems, and really valuing all the different outputs you can get from that farm, from that enterprise. And why that is interesting. So in here, we've got financial projections and stuff for the different enterprises to see. My challenge was to see, how long would it take me, how many years without too many inputs would it take me to get 12 grand income from each enterprise, and what would that actually look like to be able to figure out this? So what I just want to compare that to is the turkey input output analysis, that there's a lot more inputs to the turkeys than there was the cows. And so it's just interesting to go through each of your enterprises like that and just be really clear, look, because it's easy for that to look like a financial thing, but it's actually looking really at the earth care impact as well of, okay, look, it's hard not to get into the kind of all the discussions and politics around what meats we should be eating and shouldn't be eating, but this whole lobbying of cows and sheep bad and turkeys and pigs and chickens and stuff good is utter rubbish when you look at what do those animals eat and where does that food come from. So yeah, I won't go into there, but I'm very happy to. I can be very distracted into that one. So I just wanted to share. And then there was a few more different enterprises I looked at. Now, one of the other tools that we use within permaculture is something called zones and sectors. And it looks at, when we're looking at the physical layout of the farm, we look at the central part of the farm. It's almost like every farm is a circle, and it's not, but we look at the house, the home, or the central point of activity, and then placing all the objects that we use on the farm around the radiating out from that central point in proximity to the center, depending on the frequency that we need to use it or go to it. So we'd have the area just right outside your back door as zone 1. And that this zoning thing is applicable to any scale system. So you can use it from your desk to what's in your top drawer, to a garden where you've got your herbs and your salads right outside your back door, right up to a massive farm system where you've got your key, your little delicate things right outside your back door that you need to look at. So you're going to have your lambing shed as close to your back door as you can if you have a system like that. And then it radiates out. So you've got your kind of zone 1, things that you're going to need to visit daily, or it needs a lot of attention. Zone 2 might be kind of weekly. Zone 3 might be monthly. Out to zone 4, which is stuff that you might look at annually. So on a bigger system, you might have like coppice trees further out into your zone 4. And then there's an area called zone 5, which doesn't actually have to be the furthest away from the house. It's the wilderness. And so ideally, obviously, anyone that looks at habitats, ideally we have a patchwork of habitats through any farm, any system, and having corridors joining them up, but we would call them zone 5. And it's a brilliant let out clause when you have a garden or farm or any system with messy, scruffy edges and you'll have someone in your family or neighbours that go, oh, that needs a bit tidying, doesn't it? No, that's my permaculture zone 5 actually. And it sounds very technical, but it's creating habitat. So that zoning system can also work on a non-physical level. So here is one that I've used it as how we figure out our people in terms of the Inkpot and the people that radiate out from there. Now, sectors, we talk about when we look at a farm of what are the flows on and off the farm that we can't really control whether they happen or not, but we can decide what we're going to do with them as they flow through. So wind, it's an obvious one. Wind's going to keep flowing across your farm, whatever you do. You can choose whether you put up a load of trees or a wall to stop that wind, or whether you put up a wind turbine or a clothesline to utilize that wind. We can also, so that's the kind of physical layout, animals, movement of wild animals, footpaths across your site, those are all sectors. On a non-physical system, when we're talking about business plans and enterprises and stuff, we can think about sectors as different kind of slices of the pie, different areas of people. So here we've got the zones of the people who are closer to the Inkpot, sometimes geographically, but also kind of like family and friends and key volunteers radiating out to those we haven't met yet. And then we've got the sectors of things like volunteers, tradespeople, co-workers, family and friends, course participants or event participants, and customers. And it just helps sometimes to kind of lay it out like that. I don't know if you have a closer look, but you can see then it helps, your systems will all be different to this, but it helps to identify and lay it out to kind of think, right, customers, who do we need to be targeting? Who have we not yet met? Who's not been involved? And also realizing that there's a lot of people around your system, a lot of people that you have these connections to, who probably, if your farm or your system is sustainable or has any soulfulness or any kind of, earth care aspect to it, people will have a connection to that farm, and often stronger than you realize. So draw on that, if, capitalize on it. I don't mean it in a bad way, but like people through lockdown, I was really careful to post every day, just pictures from the farm and updates from the farm. And so many people got in touch to say that actually that was kind of a real lifeline for them, just seeing green stuff and nature, and really grounding for them. So I feel like I'm rabbiting on at you. I'm going to stop, I think, in a second. So something that I just wanted to kind of thing that helped me to summarize it at the end is very scruffy on here. But what I did was just made this quadrant and just said, right, what are high income potentials? What are low income potentials? What's high risk, as in what, what's risky? We could do these enterprises, but it might not work so well. And what's low risk? And what we realized is we really want the stuff that's high income and low risk, as a nice stable income potential. So things like cows, for us, cows are great. They're just good and solid and stable. And if you're looking at really farm enterprise stuff, I often talk about the cows and the sheep if you think about Monopoly. as your hotels and your houses. So your cows are your hotels and your sheep are your houses. You know, the sheep can come and go quite quickly sometimes if it's all going wrong. But the cows, you know, they're your big investments, especially when you're small scale farming, and they can create a bigger income from you. But there's proper ways to talk about it rather than hotels and houses and less capitalist, but it can help like that to look at, you know, in your farm enterprises, when you've got what we call a poly income system, which would be lots of different income streams, much more resilient than just one. Just like polycultural systems in our growing farms rather than monocultural systems, our poly income systems go alongside that, improve that resilience. We want to look at what, you know, of course, and this is something that always comes up, that whenever you have a farm tour or people find out, there's always these wonderful fresh-faced inputs of like, oh, have you thought about milking? Oh, have you thought about cheese making? Oh, have you thought? Yes, I have thought about all these things. And yes, I quite like sleeping sometimes for a few hours every night. You know, people get really excited and enthused, and that's lovely. And I think I have to remind myself not to turn into a grumpy old woman and be like, sod off, I can't do everything. But there's another side to this, that all those layers that can happen on a farm don't all have to happen by one family, one person, one household. You know, there are so many opportunities to bring in other people. So through this, I realized I really wanted to have bees and honey on the farm, but I realized I don't have any more time to do more stuff. I need to do the things that I do better and more efficiently. But so now we have a local guy who had bees somewhere else, but didn't really like, you know, he was in an area that was being sprayed and stuff. So he's over the moon to bring his hive onto a farm that isn't being sprayed. And he does all the bees, all the honey stuff. We have the bees, which is lovely. And we have the honey that we can sell. And we just get, you know, 1 or 2 quid per jar that we sell. And he gets, you know, the vast majority of that honey. But our customers are really happy, because when I do the egg round, they can also have honey as well as the wool, as well as the meat and stuff. And he's really happy because he does the bee stuff, but doesn't have to do like the people stuff. So he's really happy with that. And there are so many opportunities, something that Joel Salatin talks about a lot, and lots of other people talk about, that you have the opportunities when anyone has access to land to be able to stack in loads and loads of different enterprises that other people can run. And if you're going to go down that line, it really, you know, communication is key on those things. And there's lots of permaculture techniques that you can use to do that. So I think I've pretty spoken more than enough. And I'm really happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Hannah.
If people want to, I'm also really happy to do a few tricks on kind of how you could apply some tools to your farms, but it might be better to kind of get a gauge of where other people are at and what they want to know. You know, we might have a load of really experienced permaculture farmers here already. Who knows? Great.
Thanks, Hannah. Well, look, let's there's some really lovely things you said there. I really liked the idea that clay is investment soil. Everything you put in stays. I've not heard it described like that, but that's a really lovely, memorable way of thinking about it. And to end also on the farm really is a sort of habitat where different niches that different people can come in and occupy. I think that's a real key to the kind of future, isn't it? Of how we can get more out of our farms and our land, is to bring more people in. So thank you for that. So let's open the floor up now to any questions, anything from any clarifying questions for Hannah, or anything else you'd like to know about the Inkpot or the farm enterprise that she has. Does anybody have a question? Just jump in. I think we're a small enough group just to ask questions. James?
That was great. Yeah, please. That was great to hear all about the Inkpot, Hannah. And definitely, you know, made us smile. My partner Rose is in the background. Definitely had a lot of smiles on her face relating to a lot of the stories that you were telling. How did the locals take your farming enterprise? You know, we get asked that one quite a lot here. Considering we started off as our business name as Tapanoth Permaculture. Tapanoth is the hill that we live on. And when we started producing, I changed it to Tapanoth Farm. And we suddenly got into the community a lot more. It was very interesting, but that's maybe time for another chat. But yeah, I just wanted to know how you've been sort of accepted into the local farming community, or
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. It's something that I've put a lot of deliberate thought into, because it's a story that, you know, is repeated all around, you know, all sorts of really keen permaculturalists, or, you know, new entrant farmers that kind of come, great, you know, right, and then really frustrated with current farming systems, and you hear all sorts of clangers of conversations that burn bridges within the first few weeks or months and things. And I was really, really determined not to fall into that trap. And it is so easy to fall into it. So one of the things that helps me is, oh, I'm kind of a mixed generation farmer, because in some ways I'm first generation. I grew up in a town, but all of my family are from farming backgrounds, but kind of some have missed 1 or 2 generations. So there is that farming background there. So I kind of, when we first moved here, and Daniel, my ex, he also is from a farming background, but farming only, his parents were the first generation of farmers. So, but we had enough in us that to some people we could introduce ourselves as the farm kids that didn't get on well enough with our parents to be able to take on the family farms. And so that kind of set us in good stead straight away. But also I was really deliberate to, well, I think it's something that I fundamentally believe, and it's really important to take on, is that everybody is the expert on their own farm. And who on earth are we to go and tell someone else how to do it? So I will happily rabbit on forever about how I'll do things on my farm and how I know my farm. And I'll happily teach people tools that they can apply to their farm. But every single farm is different. Every farming family is different. Every setup is different. And when you have farms that are run by generations of farmers, it is only those farmers who know how to run that farm. So how dare we go and judge them or tell them what they should be doing? So my neighbours spray, my neighbours cut hedges at times when I really wouldn't cut hedges. They, you know, they do things that I would not make the same decisions if it was my farm, but it's not my farm, it's their farm. So I very deliberately have never gone in to tell other people how they should farm, and listen. And if I, by listening and creating a safe space, I've had incredible conversations with local, large-scale, arable, conventional farmers who have opened up to me about how they're concerned about the future of oil and the future of fertility. And I think if I'd have come at them going, I'm an organic farmer, then they wouldn't have opened up like that. So people humour us. I think they humoured me for a long time because we just came at it gently. And then the other side is farmers need to see proof of pudding. So they're never going to have some upstart come and tell them how to do stuff. But what farmers want to see is the end produce that's good. They want to see, we all, you know, I'm telling farmers what they want, but I think the vast majority of farmers that I've ever come across want to see either good produce. They want to see most farmers have a soft spot for one type of wildlife or other, you know, whether it's owls or bad, you know, not many badgers really, but you know, hares. Or so if you can show, you know, if you can show that you've got a way to nurture those great crested newts, or, you know, or those skylarks or something, they're going to be interested. But also they really want to see the future generation being involved. And I think that's heartbreaking for most farmers, is knowing that their kids don't want to take on a farm. So when farmers can see that your grass is growing earlier in the season than theirs is, that you've got people that are paying more for your hogget than theirs are, when they can see your kids being involved in the farm and volunteers turning up and wanting to muck out the turkeys and stuff for no money, that's the stuff that turns their heads. And then they don't ask questions, they come and have a conversation. But that's, yeah, I think it's those kind of approaches that really help. So.
Thanks,
Hannah. Yeah.
I think the other side of that, though, it's quite an interesting, the kind of the dark side, the really annoying side of it, is if anyone is in doubt as to whether sexism still exists in farming, is to say that we're accepted, I'm accepted in the local community, might be stretching it somewhat. And so I've been accepted by some through my blood, sweat and tears, because I can bring lambs back to life when other people haven't. And I've, you know, and people have seen me, you know, helping other people lamb and stuff. And And so I've got kudos for that. I've got kudos for the fact that I've managed to keep farming when we got divorced. And I think most people went, I'll give her a season, might give her a year, 6 years on, and that girl's still farming. That's a bit weird. But there's a 100-acre block just to the side of us that I have asked that gets rented out, and I've asked every year that farmer for me to be able to rent it out, and every year he acts as if he's never had that conversation with me before. Acts really surprised. He's like, would you really like to rent it out? Oh, right, I'll talk to my sons about that. And every year it's rented out to somebody else who happens to have testicles, and they're different people every year. And I have, communities talk, and so I know people who know them, and I've had it confirmed at least twice by independent folk that it is because I'm a girl, and that they don't believe that I could possibly cope with farming 100 acres, even though I already do. And do it better than them. But so it's those things. So I am accepted to a certain level, but yeah, it'll take a bit longer for some others. That's all right. One day I'll buy their land and they can suck on it.
Thanks, Hannah, for that fine display of bravado. Excellent. So any other questions for Hannah? I mean, they are serious issues, aren't they? Sexism is alive and well in farming. Any questions for Hannah? Adrian, are you going to come in?
Yeah, yes, I'm not a farmer, so I don't want to block anybody else who's thinking about their individual farm. I'm the chair of Good Food York, which is based in York. But we're very keen on partnership working to try and develop regenerative agriculture or permaculture sort of agriculture in our hinterland, our agricultural hinterland of North Yorkshire. So we're trying to work across 2 local authority boundaries. And what I'm really interested in is trying to get new entrants into permaculture farming or any sort of real farming. Somewhere in your talk, Hannah, thanks ever so much. It was really good, as every talk you've given has been. So thank you for that. But quite early on, you said something about the 2 things you always run out of are time and money. And I was thinking, but land, what about land? That's a really big problem for people trying to get land. I know bits about the Kindling Trust in Manchester and their efforts to buy land and then let new entrants onto it. And that's great if you've got a system like that. But if you're a one household system that's wanting to create a new farm, trying to get the land and the time and the money and all that sort of thing, can I get you to say anything about how we could try and tackle that in Yorkshire? And I hope Andy's got an ear open for this, for trying to piece together a Yorkshire permaculture network around this sort of thing and pull all the members together and brainstorm it.
That would be great. I'll come back with a question with a bit of an answer as well. But yeah. Hannah, what would you say to that?
Just
Oh, I didn't get that, Adrian. What did you say? That last bit?
No, sorry. Can I just come in with one other thing? When you said SWOC, that's great. I've turned it around to cows: challenges, opportunities, weaknesses, and strengths. And,
that's brilliant.
And you said cows were really simple, which that is, and that's quite a good approach. But then you said turkeys were more complicated. So I was trying to think of a turkeys. So I've got talent, understanding, resilience, knowledge, ethics, yak, and sleeping. But as a way of trying to just flip cows into something like that. And ethics or experts, just going to pick out the R from that and turn it from resilience into ripples. Really thinking about all the things you do and your neighbours watching you and this 100-acre. Can we between us think of any way to get your ripple to go out through that 100 acres and beyond? in all the ways that you've been working, blood, sweat and tears and outputs from it. I'm saying it's a
Okay.
bit rambly, but
Thanks,
I'm
Adrian.
trying to find new ways into creating
Yeah.
opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that, Adrian. I don't know why I haven't thought of cows for swap before. I absolutely love that. I'm going to think of you and do that. Right. So there's a number of things about access to land, and I think, you know, I got this 18 acres through pure privilege. You know, it's inheritance money, and it's, you know, it's totally unfair, and so I wanted to use it for good, and that's what I take the fair share ethic really to heart with. That I'll always have interns that wouldn't otherwise have access to land, you know, really try to make ways that people can access this land that wouldn't be able to otherwise. And then, but then now we have over 100 acres and the potential for a couple more 100 acres on a couple of months a year. And it's all through loads of different landlords. I've got 6 different landlords. And so one thing I would say straight away is people often fall into the, I want to work on land, so I must buy the land. And that is instantly going to hit you with a lifetime of mortgage, or, you know, a huge financial, you know, completely unfair financial burden. And I would say in lots of ways it's completely unnecessary. There's so much opportunity to rent land, especially starting out small. And I think it's something having taught permaculture for years and years and years, it's something that I come up, you know, that I meet a lot, is people that want to have access to land and are very, very stunted in their ability to be able to get land. I don't mean they're stunted, I mean their ways are blocked and they feel very blocked by it. The reality is, if someone was to just put a large chunk of land into a lot of people's hands that want it, they might not actually know what to do with it. And I mean that in the kindest, lovingest way. And I know lots of people would know what to do with it. So actually starting really small can really help. The other thing is you're saying about new entrants to coming into permaculture to access land. There's a huge amount of large-scale farmers out there who are much more open to permaculture and regenerative agriculture than a lot of people realise. There is a quiet revolution going on in farming that's been going on, you know, for a long time, but it's really gained momentum in the last 10 years with conferences such as this and the Oxford Real Farming Conference, Groundswell, organisations like PFLA, work that Permaculture's done, Land Workers Alliance, and them all coming together, all the certification bodies. And I come across a lot of farmers who are really open to permaculture and open to being far deeper green than their own farm labels would have you imagine, you know, because they're often still farming under conventional methods.
I'm very happy to broaden that to new entrants to permaculture farming or regenerative farming.
Well,
and so
hear what you say, and I support you in that.
Yeah, so there are a lot of farmers out there who, given the right kind of conversations with the right people, would be open to allowing people onto their farm to, you know, have a little bit of it, to work a little bit for a year or so, you know, clear boundaries and clear communication. But I've been surprised how many times I've had conversations with people who actually want to rent out land to people to have a go at something. And I think renting can be a brilliant stepping stone for people to give it a go, because it's a massive jump to go from not living off the land to suddenly living off the land. And it, to have a stepping stone maybe of renting can really help.
Thanks, Hannah. So just to add to that, I think, and maybe to amplify a couple of things, it does feel like there are increasing numbers of conventional farmers that are becoming very interested in permaculture and agroecological methods. Yeah. So you've got people like, say, Matt Swarbrick at Henbant in North Wales, and he's now part of Farming Connect, which is a Welsh Government farming scheme, and gets a lot of interest from farmers. People like Marina O'Connell and Bob and Rachel down at Apricot Centre, they've been working with the Biodynamic Land Trust. They've got They've won, I think, one best small farm of the year or something. Reading today some awards. They've got real interest from the church, which is a huge landowner in Devon, Duchy. There's some big land agents, and actually they cannot keep up with farm consultancy requests. There are literally thousands of acres of farming, which is now, being actively considered for converting to a sort of much more permaculture, agroecological, biodynamic style farming. So I think there is a big shift. And the other big shift that I think is worth bearing in mind is succession, and just really trying to inspire the next generation to say, well, maybe it is worth keeping on with the family farm.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is, as Hannah was saying earlier, about once you start to take that permaculture approach, really sort of using it to stack in other enterprises. So beekeepers, or the people that will milk the cows, or whatever it might be, actually just kind of layering in all those other different opportunities. And Steve Newman, who's a real pioneer in agroforestry, professor at Leeds and other universities, he always reminds me and others that farming, actually, one of the derivations of the word is contract. It's about having a contract with a piece of land, and actually careful use of contracts can layer in far more people and enterprises into a farm. So I think one of the key characteristics of the permaculture farm enterprise is lots of different people involved. Is that growing number of people that are actually able to occupy the same space, just like 10 different species of birds occupy an oak tree. They use it at different times and in different places and in different ways. And that's a lesson from nature, really, is how to utilize all the different niches. So yeah, new entrants, but also really working with who is there already, and then encouraging and supporting their young people to keep going. So anyway,
Andy, can I just add to that as well, that at the moment, especially with wonderful ideas like Brexit happening,
and elms, yes,
we have a huge labour shortage in farming. So for new entrants, this is a brilliant time. If anyone, I think a lot of you might already be farming, but people who are thinking about wanting to work on farms, seriously go and apply for some jobs, because you don't have to have experience, you need to have willing. And so many farmers are calling out for people, and then you can take those skills and that knowledge of permaculture and gently, subtly sow some seeds, inoculate some of that thinking, because there's a lot of really scared and really tired farmers out there who really are looking at the future and don't understand things about carbon and methane and stuff, and there's a lot of skill sharing that can be done. So
Anna, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I have a question. Could you say a bit more about how you've thought through like the distribution of your food, how you've built a local market, how you've overcome some of those like social justice challenges of people not being able to afford your food, and how that side of things? I'd be interested to know more.
So there's something that really beautifully happens every year with the Inkpot customers, that they're amazing, that we have people who buy Christmas turkeys, and they can pay it forward and either buy a whole turkey or sections of turkey for other people. And our food bank, our Sleaford food bank, we have delivered up to 40 turkeys before, I think it was it? No, just under 30 turkeys one year. And when we only produce 100 in the first place, that's quite amazing to the food bank. And they've all been paid for. So this is a really interesting side of it for the farmers. It's, we get great kudos for it, because it's like, oh, look at the Inkpot donating all these turkeys. It's like, no, I've been paid. We've paid, these turkeys have been paid for. But we do give a couple from us, but it's our customers that pay it forward. And so that is really beautiful, and love that. Then I do a little egg round. It is a little egg round. I call that our eggs the gateway drug to Inkpot produce, because local folks who aren't foodies will not consider the amount that we pay for turkeys, that we charge for turkeys. They're like, nah, that's not for me, can't do that. But they might consider a box of eggs at £2 rather than £1 when it's delivered to their door. And so then they try the eggs and go, "Whoa, your eggs are really yellow. Your eggs taste like my grandma's, like used to be." Oh, and it sets a whole, chain of thinking. And they start buying a bit of beef mince or this, and then we've got them hooked. But what I do is, when we are different, as we have, there'll be times of the year when you have more eggs than normal, and other times when you don't have many eggs. So when we have a surplus of eggs, and I try to make sure that we do have a surplus of eggs for a lot, we try not to sell them all, then I take them to the village food bank and drop them off. We've got a lovely church warden lady who organises a very, very local food bank. And on average, most of the time, there's about 3 or 4 houses in the village who struggle. And so they get a box of eggs for about half the year from the Inkpot each week, and that's off our own back. That's not anyone else donating. So it's that fair share, to kind of charge a fair price so that I can try and get an income, which I haven't always been able to do. I figured out one year I was making 11p an hour on the turkeys, which was slightly depressing. So then I did put my prices up, and there's a lot of outlays to begin with. So I have said in the past that we do everything direct. One thing through social media is that we have a fantastic, and because I've taught nationally and internationally permaculture and spoke at different conferences and run a number of events and stuff. I before we moved here, I did have a personal kind of, not following, but like I had a fantastic, the permaculture community is amazing and incredibly supportive. So as soon as we got here and started producing things, we knew we would have a national and international customer base that we could send things out to. And it's kind of like then trying to go backwards and go from international to national to local, and trying to get more local folks into it. But we get picked up by different larger scale producers. So we were producing turkeys for the Ethical Butcher for the last couple of years in London, and another organic butcher down in London. And this year I had to be really harsh to them and just go, no, I'm going to do it all directly this year. But there's a lovely, really ethical meat box scheme who will pay the same price that I pay. I charge customers direct. And so she's having all of our hogget now, because it's just a lot less work to have one person. So there's lots of different streams, and always having that flexibility. If I know someone is really struggling, like we produce vegetables, but not for sale. We have vegetables for ourselves and for other people. But when I know that there's a household struggling somewhere, when I'm off on the egg round, sometimes they'll get a box of something on their doorstep just to help them get through that week. And I think we all have that responsibility, that people have access to land and food production. And I had this rant with a group that came around with a PFLA on a farm tour just a month ago, that we had a lot of large scale farmers and people there. And I just said, look, folks, you've all got to check your privilege. You might talk about you struggle, but you really, really don't have an idea. And so it's having those conversations with other farmers, because I feel like I straddle different worlds. I'm sure lots of us do, but that I can, just as easily be talking to really large scale farmers, as well as, households that are really, really struggling. And we all need to check our privilege and take stuff to, pass stuff down the chain or along the chain, and both ways, so those messages have to go back that people need reality checks. So, yeah.
Thanks, Hannah. So I was going to ask, because I'm aware that James from Tapper North is here, and one of the things we said on the programme was we'd really welcome hearing about other people's enterprises. So it's a real pleasure to have James here, and I just wonder whether you'd be willing just to say something about what you do, really. I mean, we've got 28 minutes before the session closes, so just there's a bit of space if you'd like to, and then we can have a bit more discussion. So can I hand over to you, James?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Nothing like unplanned presentation.
It's okay.
No, it's just nice. It's nice to have a chat, and it's been great to, as I've said already, to hear Hannah's story. Because yeah, sometimes you can kind of feel quite alone. Sometimes not. I mean, we're not really feeling that, but it's just great to hear other people's stories. I think we're in very similar places actually with our enterprises and how we've integrated into the community and that kind of mix that one needs of permaculture versus not making yourself stick out too much like the local weirdo, because ultimately we want these ecological principles to be accepted and not to stick too much into the edges and come out a bit and make ourselves aware. But anyway, yeah, we're in Aberdeenshire, so up in northeast Scotland, and we've got a very small piece of land really for farming standards. It's 8 acres. I can pull up a picture actually. In fact, there's a design on the wall right behind me. We've got our plan stenciled onto our living room wall, our dining room, so we can eat food and just never get away from permaculture designing. But we're also surrounded by arable. Up here in Aberdeenshire, it's just barley, maybe some oats, but we're completely surrounded by that. This is, I don't know how that's going to come out, but so can you tell which one we are and
That's
who our
amazing.
neighbor is?
Fantastic.
That's a drone shot that I took last week. But yeah, so very monocultural barley production all around us because we've got distilleries absolutely everywhere, which is quite great. Kind of design wise, I've got this sketch here. That's what's on the wall behind me pretty much. So you can see sort of what's going on there. But I moved here in 2012, so yeah, coming up to 10 years on this site. I completed my PDC nearly 20 years ago when I was in Australia with Robin Francis at Jambon Gardens, and that was really my start to all of this. My mum was living in Australia and decided to come back to the UK, and we've got a very close relationship. We thought, shall we start a sort of family smallholding? And we did. So my mum lives next door. We were very lucky. We've got 2 houses on this property that are linked together by a central sunroom. A conservatory is classed as one house. So myself and my partner, Rosa, and my daughter, we live here. My mum lives right next door. So we've got a very family unit. And my mum's in her early 70s and we can't stop her working. But none of us are from farming backgrounds, but permaculture really has been I didn't go to university. Permaculture was what I've known for 20 years now, and been lucky enough to be able to practice it in various places all around Scotland and in Portugal and Australia, and that's my dog. But we set up the place as a family smallholding, and I really wanted to try and set up as a demonstration site. That was from the get-go was the idea, because I'd come back from Australia and seen all these fantastic examples, clutching the designer's manual under my arm, and thought how important it is to start something up in a cold place like Scotland, when you used to, you don't hear it so much anymore, but you used to hear permaculture doesn't work here because it's from Australia. And luckily we don't hear, I haven't heard that actually that often recently. So maybe that's a good thing. But it was important to me to try and set the place up, because a bit like you, Hannah, I felt quite privileged that we had this farm. It's an inheritance that I've been given whilst my mum is still alive, which is fantastic. And I wish that could happen to more people, to pass things down to people when they're alive and can appreciate it and share it. So I felt the need to be able to open up and bring people in, volunteers, and with the aim of running courses, which I know a lot of people go down that route within permaculture of that. And we did, and we became a land centre, Scotland Centre. I'm not sure on this one anymore because they haven't been talking about it for a while, but we were also classified as a permaculture research institute through Jeff Lawton's network for a while, but I think things have gone a little bit quiet on that front, so I'm not sure whether we are still affiliated with them. But that was a great contact to meet, and Jeff came here and did some filming, which again hasn't surfaced, unfortunately. I think he did the tour about 2016 of the whole of the UK.
He did. He took lots of photos, lots of videos of us in Leeds, and not seen them either.
Lots of great places he went to. We were the last on his journey. So anyway, that was nice to get to kind of have him here. Taught our first permaculture, hosted the first permaculture design course here in 2015 with Angus Suter, and that was accredited through PRI. So, and then the following year we were going to do another course, and teacher-wise it didn't work out, and so I had to quickly think, right, what am I going to do this year? And I thought, I know how to grow vegetables, I'll start a market garden. And that's how the CSA, it wasn't a CSA in 2016, it was a regular veg box, but started the veg box here with about 18 customers in 2016. This is still just myself working, I hadn't met Rosa at that point. And by 2017, we were up to 30 customers, and I'd started to introduce the CSA concept to our customers, not members, but we started to use terminology and try and get them ready for that, because in the first year I'd already realized that I was not going to do door-to-door deliveries. I needed some cash up front to make sure that we had our customer base and we're going to lose people, because veg boxes, people kind of get very excited about them, like a gym membership, and think they're going to get all healthy and eat lots of veg, and then they drop out, and that's just really difficult as a producer because we've left with all these vegetables in the garden. So we became a CSA, and it's been fantastic. It has been really great. So community supported agriculture, for anyone who's not aware, I'm sure the people in this talk are. That's been our business framework for the last 6 seasons anyway, and we've been. So we only produce on 1/4 of an acre of bed space, of growing space, 1/4 of an acre. The market garden itself is about 1/2 an acre, because we've got forest garden tree rows and willow coppice and everything all mixed into the market garden. But the actual growing space is 1/4 of an acre, and we at the most we were doing 50 veg boxes per week for 22 weeks. Our season's very short. We're 270 meters above sea level and get snow from now October till May, end of May sometimes. So it's a challenging site for growing veg, definitely. Which then leads me on to how the progression of the farm is going now, that we've been focusing a lot on the perennial side of things over the last, since I moved here, we've always been planting trees. And the previous owners had planted a lot of fantastic broadleaf natives, which are now 10, 15 years old. But we're really expanding the agroforestry side of things. If anything, I've been very inspired by, I guess, what people would call the early permaculture of the permanent agriculture, perennial systems. And, the veg boxes, we've done our best, we utilize no dig. We've got perennials mixed into the garden, but I still see it as quite a difficult business, to be in and still kind of stick to our permaculture ethics, because it's an annual garden and it takes a lot of energy, no matter how we're working it, with no dig, which does reduce the labor. So we've been focusing a lot, planting a lot more multi-strata agroforestry, I think is what is a better way to explain it, because we're not just doing single rows of trees within our grazing fields. We're putting in as many layers as possible without it being too complicated. Because again, Hannah, that's something, you were saying, and I've heard from people like Matt down at Ragman's of simplifying things. And we've already gone through that here in the 10 years of wanting to do everything, because you can see all the possibilities. And as a business, which a farm is, that doesn't always make sense. So I'm rambling because I haven't really. No, I was
don't ramble at all. That's all fascinating. Please ramble a bit more if you'd like to.
Well, really, just going on to say that, the perennial systems. We're building a tree nursery this year. I'm trying my best, basically, to see how can we earn a living through those perennial systems, because I think that's something that just doesn't get talked about that much. Agroforestry is definitely getting talked about a huge amount, has done for a while. From a permaculture community point of view, because I'm growing chestnuts here, but really realistically, that's for wood fuel, as a coppice, because I just don't think we're going to get chestnuts. I mean, even our hazelnuts aren't always that reliable. We really are quite an exposed, or were very exposed, not so much anymore. So, you know, we're looking at wood fuel. We're looking at tree nurseries for selling stock, because we've been taking cuttings of things like Aleagnus that people want to get hold of, their hands on, autumn olives, etc. And so we're making sure we're just taking cuttings every year and developing tree nurseries, willow cuttings. We're looking at the possibility of berry crops and things. So yeah, we're at that almost redesigning stage again. This concept of that master plan that you can do when you've just left your PDC is, you know, it's always evolving and it's always changing here. With what we want to do and what's important to us, because we have dairy goats, so Rosa milks every day. In fact, we've just dried them off, but so that's the first time in 3 years that we haven't had our own milk and cheese. We've got geese, we've got Shetland sheep, we had Shetland cows. We tried keeping cattle, and I love cows too. Cows are fantastic. They're so relaxed, and goats are like the punks of the livestock world, and you know. But our goats are pretty chilled out. Actually, they don't escape that often. Although they go into our latest forest garden planting, just got a bit of a munch from them, which was awful. Lots of ponds we've put in, canals, like a little canal system we tried this year, which has been great fun. So yeah, a food forest farm. That's our concept that we're going with. Can we do that? Can we kind of create a forest ecosystem that can supply our needs as the inhabitants of the land? Yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Oh, and our YouTube channel. That's been something that we've been doing for 3 years now, almost. We've suddenly had a burst of that. We're up to 15,000 or something subscribers now, and that's really helping. So, and that pay goes into our income stream, because we're earning from that too. So the education side of things is where we started off as tapping off permaculture, moved into tapping off farm. I can see us kind of coming back a little bit now, actually coming back into the education. We were teaching courses here when we didn't have a market garden, we didn't have all these agroforestry systems. And I know obviously you don't have to have that design, that demonstration site to be able to teach, but it's very important for us that people can come here and see a working small holding, small farm. So we're certainly very excited now about the years to come of getting back into the educational side of things.
Great. Thanks, James. That was fantastic. Really, really interesting to hear all that. And it reminds me, I've just been reading a book. I've just finished a book called The Politics of Permaculture.
I'm just reading that right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because he talks about the three phases of permaculture being, first of all, very much about a perennial agriculture, which is the name of the first book. And then really the second phase being the designer's manual, so moving into the design of perennial agriculture. And then the third phase being principles and pathways beyond sustainability, where essentially it's everything. It's all of human culture, or it can be applied to all of human culture. And each one of those areas has value. And one of the things I've been trying to say recently in various talks is to remind us that there are 600 million family farms in the world. Over half of the world's labor force works in farming, and most of them are the poorest people on the planet. So actually, even if we just did stage one crack agriculture, that would be a massive, massive contribution to the world. And the fact that we come with this, design approach and a holistic approach to society is also absolutely brilliant. But I feel like we should pay a bit more attention to that perennial agriculture. So it's really great to hear that, James, and that side of what you're doing.
Yeah, I really agree. I mean, I found that section of the book very interesting. Just I always find the history of movements, or whatever you want to call it, very interesting to see how it's gone. And yeah, I suppose I do identify a little bit more with the earlier sort of concepts of permaculture design, but it also is fascinating how it's progressed.
Great. So any questions for James, or is there just sort of general discussion we want to go into now?
I have a question. I have a question for James and Hannah, and maybe in a couple of sentences, if you were comparing your farm against a what-if scenario of your farm where you didn't use permaculture design, so it was like a conventional organic farm, what would be the differences? So basically, what are the benefits of using permaculture design?
Great question, Dennis.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. It's interesting when you said that. First of all, I was like, I can't imagine now. My head is I'm so indoctrinated into designing permaculturally. I was like, oh, how could, it's because it's a whole system approach. So it now surprises me when I talk to other farmers that I respect, and I talk to them about just basic stuff that seems really obvious to me about basic layout of the zonings and the sectors and stuff. And they go, oh, that's a really good idea. You go, oh, okay. And so, because I mean, permaculture didn't start the zoning idea. That was von Thunen's concentric zoning set theory. Bill Mollison didn't come up with that, nor did David Holmgren. So one thing, if you really want to kind of compare the two different systems, is one trick that I've done with other farmers, smallholders, gardeners. You can do it to any system, but when you do it to a small farm especially, it really works, is to get farmers to just very quickly sketch the layout of their farm, and then with a pen, like be the pen, and draw your daily route of what you have to do every day to sort all the animals or do the basic daily checks that you do. And what you'll get is this kind of like crazy shape, and all farms will do it. But the ones that have been consciously designed from the beginning will have much smaller movements, and it will go around like this. Ones that haven't been consciously designed from the beginning will have these kind of crazy things like this, where you kind of go, and if you think about your allotment layout or your kitchen layout, or we all have these moments when we find ourselves doing this, and you kind of go, and you look at the pattern that you've drawn on the paper afterwards and go, what is that? And it's like, oh, well, the pig shed's over there. And you're like, well, why? Or the tap is over there, and so someone's walking backwards and forwards with buckets of water, and so it might seem like a massive job to move the tap, but move the tap or get a hose, or do something like. So it's taking that time to just stop back and go, how does this all actually really interact with each other? The other, I'll let James talk in a minute, but the other really key thing is really those three ethics. So organic farming, I did an organic farming master's up near you, James, actually up at Gravestone in Aberdeen. I lived there for a year, and so there are, I've got a lot of faith in organic. We are on an organic farm, but organic by itself is just a set of standards. That's it. As a concept, but I'm not doing it justice. But really, the legal definition of organic is just a set of standards of you don't do this, you do that, you don't do this, you do that. It's not actually a design approach at all. So you can have some fantastic organic farms out there, and you can also have some organic farms that are really disjointed and not actually really thought about as a whole system at all. And organic farms, although they do need to have, there are some regulations about fairness to people in their systems, that it's not a massively strong aspect of organic. Really, organic is much more just about earth care. And permaculture, we look at the three ethics of permaculture as three circles. So you've got the earth care, the people care, and the fair share. And those three circles you'll often see overlap as a Venn diagram. And what we're aiming to do within permaculture is everything that we're doing is slap in the middle of those three circles, where those three circles overlap. And we're, if you're out in a shop buying chocolate, you need to get the organic, fair trade, fairly priced from a local shop organic chocolate, because that's the one that's right in the middle, if ever you have an ethical dilemma about buying chocolate. But that's where we want to be aiming, is that sweet spot that's all three ethics. Whereas organic farming just on its own can just be in the earth care and not necessarily in the other two at all. So
thanks, Hannah.
Yeah. Go on, James.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you said it, and we're not organic certified, and I think, you know, from what I've heard, it could be quite restrictive to us, you know, and then and restrictive. Why? Because of cycling nutrients on our farm, making do and mend, you know, working with what you have. These sort of attitudinal principles that we use a lot. We might be restricted to what we could recycle, using human manure. You know, I mean, I'm not sure we're good. We never use that on anything we're selling anyway, but there could be quite big restrictions for us. You know, and we've often heard permaculture being stated as beyond organic, and I think that's correct with that to think about. But certainly, you know, I guess if we're mimicking a natural ecosystem of what would be here growing on the side of a hill in northeast Scotland, you know, and that goes back to what I was talking about trying to think of tree crops and perennials. You know, that's not necessarily going to be on my neighbor who might be organics farm, because they're still focusing on cereals. And also trying to be as closed loop as possible. That's a big thing for us anyway. And again, that's not a standard on many farms because of obviously having to rely on things like oil, fossil fuels for the tractors and things. And I think that's a big difference for us. And that's, of course, is a scale thing sometimes. But we really trying to focus to reduce having to buy things off of the farm, without knackering ourselves, without being too detailed. But yeah.
Great. Mm-hmm. Thanks, James. I'm going to leave that there if that's okay, because there's a question I've just noticed from Kylie in chat. So Kylie, you're very welcome to turn your mic off and ask it yourself, but I can equally ask it for you. So the question is to Hannah. What is the first thing you would tell an established organic beef and sheep farmer to adapt to get closer to permaculture ethics?
I guess first I'd unmute myself, but that's really interesting. I wouldn't go and tell them what to do. I would only tell them if they were asking me. So there's my old friend Bill Mollison. You're asking, all right, great. I'm telling you then, Kylie. All right. But yeah, Bill Mollison used to say, only go where you're invited. So don't preach to people that don't want to hear it. Don't, you know. So, and I take that, you know, to heart. So but yeah, so you're asking. So one of the hi. So what was it? What's the first step?
What would you tell an established organic beef and sheep farmer to adapt to get closer to permaculture ethics? So maybe, okay, you know, what's the shift in practice maybe?
Yeah, okay. So I'd happily talk about it with you more, because it's not a kind of a simple one-step thing and then you're there. But it is looking at your whole farm. So a lot, you know, if you're true organic, which I would imagine you are, you would already be looking at your farm as kind of like one organism, and stuff like James was talking about with like closed loop stuff is really important. You know, what you can do with shutting the gate and cutting the farm off from the rest of the world. It isn't, you know, you need to be producing as much as for the food for the animals within that farm already. So it is looking at it as like an orgasm, or not an orgasm, as an organism. That's
you can have fun too.
But you know, biodynamics takes that to the next level, as well as looking at the farm as one organism. And so I would really start with the ethics. So really sit down and look at those three ethics and think, okay, what are we doing? You know, draw those three circles and go, what are we doing on the farm that is earth care, and like have a play around with it, and then go, okay, what are we doing that's people care, and then what are we doing that's fair share? And you might find that you're much stronger in one or two of those ethics than the others, and then that kind of opens you up to kind of go, oh, okay, what could we be doing? The first thing with any permaculture thinking is observation. And so permaculture always starts with observation. It's starting with what your system is currently doing. And it may be that actually doing a permaculture design on your farm, it's a design approach, so it'd be looking at your farm and starting a design approach. But you might find that you're already a long way there already, and it's not a huge amount of stuff that you have to do, because the lovely thing about permaculture is it's actually really obvious. Loads of it, when you hear it and when you learn about it, you go, oh yeah, well, that's nothing new, is it? But it's pulling it all together in a way that you go, oh right, okay, that makes sense. So it would be really, to make something permaculture, would be to do a design on it and go, okay, what do we want to be achieving with the farm? What are we currently doing really well? What are we not doing so well? What can we change? And what are our resources that we have available to us? And go through that design process. So yeah, I'd recommend doing a kind of a permaculture course if you can. There's some fab ones that are done online, and if you can get away from the farm, which I know lots of people can't, to go away and do one would be great. But also, I don't want to do a load of self-promotion, but I'm also happy to do a bit of consultancy, do a bit of tutoring with, like, I'm a senior tutor in the diploma system, worked with many farmers and landowners to help them to permaculturize their place. I'm really happy to do that with anyone who's interested, to kind of guide you through that process more. So yeah.
Great. Thanks, Hannah. Well, I noticed that we're nearly out of time, so I'm going to draw us to a conclusion. So yeah, thanks to Hannah, Anna and James. Thanks for you bringing in your work as well, and to everyone that's come here today. I think what we've seen is that permaculture offers a real good pathway towards farms that are regenerative, biodiverse, soil enhancing, resilient, profitable, and if Hannah's right, orgasmic. So I hope that this session has given you a sense of how you could incorporate permaculture into your enterprises, and maybe more than anything else, just inspired you to do so. I think that's, for me, there's such a lot of just inspiration, really, I see from the farms around me that are doing permaculture, because they're always evolving and changing and growing and developing, and it's just so much more interesting than a field that stays the same every year. So I think there's something inspiring about permaculture, and I know from my work as chief executive that there really is growing interest, and I said earlier about henbant and apricot and Inkpot, and these kind of centres of excellence, which are really starting to spread ideas out to really quite major landowners around the country. So just finally to say, the Permaculture Association is very keen to connect any of you with farmers and growers in your area, and help you to see permaculture in practice and to learn more about how to apply permaculture principles. So please do join the Permaculture Association and help us take permaculture forward in the UK. And this month, if you join the Permaculture Association, then you can upgrade your membership to project level at no extra cost. So it is a very good time to join. And yeah, as a member, you can add yourself to the map and see other members and find out what's going on, and go and visit people. So yeah, we're really there to try to support people to connect with each other, learn from each other, share our stories and our news, and learn much more about what we do. Learn much more about how we apply permaculture to farming and communities and schools and houses and many different contexts. So yeah, thanks again for coming. Thanks, Anna, for hosting. Thanks all for being here, and I hope to see you another time. Okay, thanks all. I think we're done.
Thank you, Andy.